Why do you think that this particular comment that Ranveer has made has blown up to this degree?
I think it's the same reason that people love Bagban.
Why is everybody ignoring all the major news headlines that have happened in the last 7 to 10 days? What's happening in, Manipur? There is a university in which a Nepali girl was found dead.
Yeah.
There is just so much going on.
I just think it's easy outrage. To outrage about other things, you need to have knowledge about other things. You need to put in work to outrage over these things.
What is wrong with parents having sex? Like, parents are parents because they have sex in most cases.
Everything on the internet is a fight for relevance. Everybody wanted to be on India's Got Latent is because it made them more relevant. Again, I see the irony that we are also having this conversation, but we are going to be doing this every week and there's going to be different issues every week. It just so happens in the second week in itself, this has blown up.
Hello and welcome back to So What. This is our second episode and we're joined, as we were last time, by Nikhil Taneja, chief and co-founder of Yuvaa. But we also have a very special guest who's hopefully also promised us that she's going to be on every week. We'll see how that pans out. And it's actually the first ever employee of Yuvaa, Garima Kunzru. Thank you for joining.
Hey, thank you.
Nikhil, do you want to introduce Garima because I feel like you are the better person to do it?
Garima is the most important person in my life. She was employee number 1 of Yuvaa. Yuvaa would not exist, and this is true, it would not exist if she wasn't there. At least it wouldn't exist in this way. Maybe it could have been more successful. Maybe it was, maybe lesser. We don't know.
That's why we have her on the podcast,
Yeah.
because we realized last time that we just happen to agree with a lot of the things that the other person is saying. And we thought we need one person who will disagree with both of us and not be afraid to do that. And that's part of the reason Garima is here. On that note, we're going to go to our first segment, which is, so how are you feeling? Where I will ask each of you, how are you feeling? And there's a format in which you have to answer, which is, this week I am feeling dash because dash.
She's already disconnected.
She's done work.
Yeah, she's already on a mobile. Like 2 minutes of the podcast, she's just like, I don't care about this anymore.
Down. I'm going through my answers so that I can.
You have written on the answer. You've written on the answer of how you're feeling.
Yes.
It's good to write. She's a writer. So this
Of course
tracks.
she is.
Yeah.
Filmfare award winning writer, by the way.
That's true. So how are you feeling, Garima? You're new on the podcast this week and you have notes. So Garima, how are you feeling?
Right now I'm feeling bullied.
Those are big words.
Yeah.
You can't just throw them around.
Okay, I'll just not throw them around. Okay, I'm feeling, this week I think I'm feeling focused because I have a bunch of things I want to achieve and they aren't all work related. So I'm excited and focused.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Nikhil, how are you feeling this week?
How am I feeling this week, Kevin?
Yes. How are you feeling this week, Nikhil?
I am feeling
I don't
weak.
know what you're talking about.
I am feeling weak, and I think this is the place where our edit should go back in time to the first episode, put a black and white footage with like sad music, where Kevin is like coughing and saying that.
This morning I woke up again with a really bad throat. But then we're like, now we have to do it. So here we are.
Yeah, it doesn't matter if Nikhil gets sick as well because of me. But
Yeah, that's
the podcast
fine.
is more important.
The podcast must
We
go
can
on.
sacrifice our founder.
It's
completely
okay.
cool. I am here even though I'm not feeling well, and I'm like, are you okay with sacrificing my health? And he seemed okay. And then my health did get sacrificed because for the last 10 days, I've been on bed rest, feeling extremely weak because you did that to me.
I'm sorry. Yeah. In my defense, Nikhil is the one who asked me to do this podcast. So if he hadn't asked me to do
So
it,
this was is it defense or revenge?
no, it's you have caused it. Like you started a
I've
company.
caused this podcast.
You hired me.
I didn't cause the virus.
You told me to do a podcast. I was sick, and then you got it. But
Fine,
I'm
guys.
sorry. I'm genuinely. This week I'm feeling apologetic to Nikhil.
Are you?
Yeah, he's coughing a lot. But for now we move on to our second segment, which is so what's up. Nikhil knows this. Garima, yeah, she's like, what part of his introduction, what part of his flow had this?
Yeah.
So we'll go around this couch, and you have to tell me one rose and one thorn.
Okay.
Right? So one rose and one thorn. A rose is something good that's happened. A thorn is something bad that's happened. And we will circle back at the end to a bud, which is something that you're hopeful or excited about. Because after this conversation, we'll hopefully need something hopeful to talk about. As Garima checks her notes, we cut away from her. Nikhil, do you want to start? Your rose and your thorn.
My rose, Well, I was sick, but at the same time, I started shooting a new series even in between the sickness, which I don't want to tell too much about, but it is in campuses. So I got to be among campus college students, which is one of my favorite things to do.
And what's your thorn for this week?
What's my thorn for this week? Me having to come to podcasts even when I am sick, because apparently I said start it. So.
You remember 5 minutes ago when you forgave me? Clearly, Garima, I hope your health is okay. And if next week you show up with a cough, then we just know that it's tradition for somebody to pass on germs as part of this podcast. Have you checked your notes for your
Yes.
rose and your thorn?
Yes.
What do they say?
I have shorter answers.
Okay, that's good. That's +2 already.
Okay, so my rose is that today I cracked a wall assisted handstand, and I have been trying for months to do that, so I'm really, really happy about it. Okay, my thorn is also not very serious. It's just I finished watching this Pakistani drama called Kabhi Main Kabhi Tum, and I'm really sad that it's over. So that's my thorn. Does that count as a thorn?
Sure, whatever.
Okay.
Does
Like
anybody want to ask me what my rose?
Yes, what was your rose and thorn for this? Is your rose and thorn?
My rose is that I spent time building a gaming PC, which is something that has been on like my childhood wish list for a really long time. That involves essentially buying a lot of computer parts and then putting them together and then testing if it works. And it didn't for 7 hours. But then I figured it out eventually. It's not a necessary investment, but for people who I think are gaming fans, they will get the joy of it.
So I won't get it.
Yeah, maybe not.
Got it.
Me
Yeah.
too.
Sorry,
Don't
guys.
get it. But happy
Maybe.
for you.
Thank you. That's the attitude I expect on this podcast. Didn't get it, but happy for you. That's how I feel about your handstand also. Yeah.
I mean, there's nothing to not get about it.
I
Maybe you
mean-
don't get the joy associated
Yeah.
with it, but
I don't
you
get
understand
the
what a handstand
complexity,
is. Yeah.
like how
Did
hard
you know
it
what
is
a
in the
handstand is? You have to
relative.
look at it in a mobile.
Despite you doing it, yeah, that's true.
I'm stressed.
I
Stop
understand.
mocking my mental
I'm
health. Nikhil.
Wow.
The way
Mocking her
she
mental
uses
health.
these
Yeah.
words.
You're bullying her and mocking her
The
mental
way
health.
she uses these words.
Isn't Yuvaa supposed to be empathetic?
It is.
It is. And Nikhil is supposed to be empathetic also. Yeah, he's supposed to be. Yeah.
This is our love
I have sweaty
language.
palms all the time.
Our love language is bullying each other.
No, it's not bullying.
Exactly.
This is just.
Glad you're not on any dating apps.
Wow.
It's fun. It's sweet.
It's fun. Our love language is banter.
Banter.
That's
That is
an acceptable way
That's what
to
it is.
put it.
Exactly.
My thorn is that I feel bad now for making you sick.
Oh my god.
I'm sorry.
Never.
Because it is kind of, we're just stuck in the zone where it's like mutual apologies. Actually, I am the only one apologizing. He's casting blame.
For both of you.
Yeah, sorry, Nikhil. Last week we spoke about Udit Narayan, we spoke about AI, and
The
one
two
of
most obvious
yeah
things to talk about
yeah, it
with
seemed
each other.
important, you
Exactly.
know, in that sense.
Udit Narayan and AI together.
And, yeah, and sorry, last week we actually took a break where we didn't talk about anything. And last week when we were discussing what should we talk about on the podcast, one of the things that's happened, and this is our So What Happened segment, which has not left the news cycle for 2 weeks, is of course the controversy over India's Got Latent, over Ranveer Lalabadia, over Samay Raina, over Apoorva Makhija. It's been 10 days since Ranveer's comments first kind of surfaced and went viral. And we're now at a place where it's kind of getting out of hand. Very interestingly, it's been almost exactly 10 years since the AIB roast. That happened in January of 2015. And time has passed, but apparently we are still stuck. So I wanted your expert opinions on why we are still talking about this as we contribute to the culture of talking about it. But the first thing I wanted to ask you guys before we get into takes is, why do you think that this particular comment that Ranveer has made, and I have options in case you need prompts,
Wow.
Oh wow.
in case Garima doesn't have notes on this,
Best podcast
I have
ever.
notes.
Best podcast.
I have 3
host
broad
ever.
options and you can kind of go outside of it as well. My first option is it Ranveer? And the fact that he is now a national creator, award-winning creator, he's been photographed with the Prime Minister, he has a certain kind of profile and he's interviewed a lot of mainstream celebrities. So has he crossed this digital threshold and is he a grade A celebrity now, where if he says something then it's instantly picked up? Number 2, is it the joke or the question? And the question is to do with parents having sex. And I am scared to repeat it now.
Don't say it.
I'm sure there'll be more arrest books, but I want to talk about that also later. Or number 3, is it just an overall kind of culture gap where old people don't get what young people consume? And is that part of the problem? Or is it something else? Nikhil, you want to?
No, first I want to hear from him.
Okay, we'll go to Garima first.
Always.
I think it's a little bit of everything, but mostly I think it's, I mean, in my opinion, I think it's the fact that this is like a party joke, you know, which is, I mean, if you've gone to parties, you know, you play this would you rather kind of games. And this sort of came out in public, and I guess the older generation was just like, this generation is supposed to be woke. They're still cracking jokes that we used to crack back in the day. Like, what is happening?
You think Devendra Fadnavis is thinking at this point that nothing has changed, and when I was young, I was saying this as well?
You never know. Don't put words in my mouth.
Yeah.
I think it's, I don't know how to give a serious answer. Like, I think it's the same reason that people love Bhagwan. Like, just, they're very touchy on, I think it's also easy outrage. Like, oh, like, yeah, mental health, like everyone thinks is a joke when that thing had, like the Deepika Padukone thing had become a huge thing. That was difficult to outrage over because they also don't take mental health seriously. So how are you supposed to outrage over that? But this, they take respect towards parents very seriously. So they're like, finally, we have something to outrage over. So I guess it was easy to outrage over, I guess.
Do you agree?
Expert opinion incoming.
He's doing his thoughtful. He's like, this the Dhirubhai Ambani post.
Now that the kids have spoken.
I have so many thoughts on this. This is the last. Like, it's so funny because when last week I was on a panel with on Barkha Dutt's show on Mojo, where somebody who actually filed the FIR was also a guest on that show, and she asked him like, what is so wrong about what he said. And that man said that you can't, in India, you can't go against faith and family. And that was his explanation. And until he told me the explanation, until he said that explanation, when I didn't know that these are the two things you can't go against.
Like Karan Johar of outrage.
I was like, अच्छा मुझे भी नहीं पता था ये. अब पता चल गया था because of the guy who actually fired the FIR. So you know that this is clearly
these are the rules.
These are the rules in his mind. But also, I suppose he represents a certain section of our society which also believes the same. Now, faith is still something that now we have, not even once, twice, multiple times bitten and, several more times shy. So, enough people, especially comedians, influencers, etc., are smart enough now not to say something against faith. And unnecessarily, you shouldn't have to. Family is not something that till this point, even I assumed, I would imagine most people in our country would have even known as something. Family पे नहीं जो कर सकते. Most of the WhatsApp messages from time immemorial have been jokes about like wife, jokes about chachas and mamas and हर type के यार WhatsApp joke तो होते ही family पर है. तुम्हारी बीवी ऐसी है, तुम्हारे बच्चे ऐसे हैं, तुम्हारे बाप ऐसा है, etc. etc. etc.
But it's mostly sexist jokes.
Of course.
So if बाप ऐसा है पे नहीं होता. If it was just about a woman, then maybe the outrage wouldn't have been this way.
Fair enough. Yeah.
It was like father and mother. How dare you? Fathers don't have time for all this.
No, but when it is, even when it is,
You're fine.
even when it is about, if it is only about the father having sex, that would I still feel like
Been
something, they would have been accepted about. It is this idea and this concept of how can you even talk about your mother in this capacity. In fact, if you've seen the Supreme Court and the statements in response to the lawyer that was representing Ranveer, they actually said that your daughters will be ashamed, mothers will be ashamed about this joke. So the fact that men who have filed those cases are angry about the fact that this joke will hurt the sentiments of women, none of whom ever get angry about the several assaults, rapes, murders of women in our country.
Marital rape.
So, I don't know, man. I just like, it's like at this point, it's just, I don't even know why this we all know this is ridiculous. Everything, like trying to find logic about this is trying to find logic about like how are we the world's, I mean, I don't want to dislike things about our country, but there's no logic to why things happen the way they happen in our country.
So you think it's just wrong place, wrong time?
So I think this would have happened sooner rather than later anyway, to both Ranveer and to Latent, because again, it's almost like, flying too close to the sun, Icarus, right? Samay and Latent were Icarus. They were really trying to push the boundaries and seeing how much is acceptable. And for whatever it's worth, everything before this seemed to be acceptable. Even when there was misogyny somewhere, there was sexism somewhere, and for whatever it's worth, I must say, I really think that Samay is very cool. I think that he has created a very interesting format. As long as it is not hate speech, as long as it is not putting down communities, etc., etc., I'm always all for, and whatever, man. I think like Gen Z has, for Gen Z, dank humor and dark humor is coping mechanisms. Young people should be allowed whatever kind of expression we want. And now if there is a thing that is popular in pop culture, we shouldn't be the people saying that don't have this. Having said that, the thing that I think Ranveer has gotten caught up in is of his own making. Ranveer is today, and I have defended him in my post, and I've defended his right to be ridiculous in the post that I wrote on Instagram, because I do feel like what is happening against him is absolutely horrid. It makes no sense to me. I feel really bad when I see the threats that he's getting. I also feel like at some point in time, when all of this is over, and I hope it is over at some point, Ranveer and people like Ranveer and podcasters like Ranveer and influencers and creators like him in this ecosystem, which I am also part of, all of us are part of at this point of time, need to take accountability and culpability about what are we creating in this ecosystem. The level and standard of intellectual discourse is so terrible that the reason something like this becomes national news is because these are the only things that has always become national news, because these are the only things we prioritize as influencers, as creators. आप किसको ला रहे हो अपने पॉडकास्ट पे पूछने को, ठीक है ना? Even right now, I just saw another podcast with another very famous podcaster at this point of time. I don't want to name him. He brought on some Baba and asked that Baba, what is your thought? And this Baba now says, I think this person should be like cleaned off the planet, which is basically saying that he should be murdered, killed, etc. Right? Why are you asking questions like this to some random person? Why are you giving platforms to these people? Then these people will say these things, and these things will become, truth. These things will go out into the universe, and somebody will take them seriously, and it will become somebody's death at some point in time, and then everybody will again turn that into content and say, "अच्छा ये हो गया, ये हो गया, ये हो गया." कैसे हुआ? तुमने तो किया है. You have started this process by platforming people who should not be platformed. You have started this level of intellectual discourse by reducing that discourse to absolutely to people who should not be allowed mics. I'm talking right now about individual responsibility. That if you are in a platform and a position of importance, are you going to at some point recognize that with great power comes great responsibility, that with great influence comes great accountability, that unless you recognize this yourself, you are going to continue having people who are going to put out absolute ridiculous stuff out in the world, and that is all that will be consumed, and it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Why is everybody ignoring all the major news headlines that have happened in the last 7 to 10 days?
Yeah.
What's happening in Manipur? We've seen that case about a woman who was killed because of anal rape, but her husband is not punished because marital rape is apparently not rape in our country, right? There is a university in which a Nepali girl was found dead.
Yeah.
There is just so much going on in our country at all times that does not get this level of, importance, prioritization, state prioritization, media prioritization, new media prioritization, conversation, discourse, because we have reduced that level of discourse, talking only about ridiculous things. And I would say that people like Beer Biceps are very much to blame for this. So this is not Schadenfreude. I'm not saying that I'm happy that this has happened to him.
Yeah.
I'm just saying if there's one thing that we should learn from this entire experience, it is the fact that for God's sake, the rest of us now need to be having better discourse on the internet. Use our platforms wisely. That is my monologue for
So
this.
it's a good monologue. I agree with you in a lot of places, but I also disagree with you in some places, right?
See?
And I will weigh in now because Garima has given me permission to have opinions on this podcast that I'm hosting when we are off camera. Thank you, Garima. Yeah, thanks for empowering me. I'll tell you where I differ on this, right? I think that you're absolutely right about Ranveer and this being almost a pyramid of culture where you are kind of setting in motion events where by platforming people, by asking these type of questions, he's asked right-wing folks, if you could ban 3 people or kick them out of India, who would they be?
Yeah.
And very much kind of contributed to this discourse, no disagreement there. My problem is that while he's done this on his show, on his podcast, he's not really faced outrage for it in a mainstream way before because of the podcast. In fact, there have been several ministers who have gone on his podcast, if nothing else, which is condoning it, right? I think the hard lesson that Ranveer has to learn and Samay has to learn to bring him into this, because it is India's Got Latent, which is at the center of this, is that if you are following a path where you are doing anything for numbers and you are justifying it almost as free market capitalism, give the people what they want, right? And you've gotten so big where you have millions of subscribers, these are getting millions of views, and you have not held yourself to any moral standard of what that could look like, then this is bound to happen. Samay had tweeted a while back saying that it's because we fear getting cancelled by the left that we don't have comedians like we do in the West, in India. And he has thrown a gauntlet and said, I will challenge the limitations of what it can be, what can be done in the name of dark comedy. Who has cancelled you now? It is the right wing. Who is standing up for you now? It is left liberals. And there is something to be said about that also.
Yeah.
But I think my fundamental answer to the question, why is this happening? And it's on a little bit of a lighter note, is that I feel like the old people, the uncles and aunties, and let's call them that, because they are the uncles and aunties who are running our country, it's almost like they have stumbled on a teenager's room and said, what the fuck are you doing? Is this what you watch for entertainment? Which is okay, and there's all of this reaction. And now in response, young people are looking at uncles and aunties and saying, what the fuck are you doing? Is this how you want to run the country? Is this the issue that you want to focus on while all of these other things are going on? And I want to make this point very clearly. I've written it down, Garima. I also have notes. That in India, it is very possible that you can wake up, go for a walk and be killed by a hoarding that falls on top of you. You can go to catch a train and you can be killed in a stampede that happens. You could be unfortunate enough to be born a woman and be a student in a college and then you get harassed. You could be somebody who is from the Dalit community in that sense, whose punishment for touching a motorcycle is that your hands get cut off. The government doesn't say anything on this. There are no arrests that have been made in these cases. You can be an Indian citizen who is in the US and deported and sent back in chains, literally, while India claims to be this superpower and best friends with the US government, and nothing happens. But you crack one, and it's not even a joke, and it's not even an original joke, right? One of the things that, and I want to briefly touch on it, and we are not experts on this, but one of the things that people are saying is that this is going to be used as a larger excuse now to police anything that is on the internet. The Supreme Court has today also said that anything going on OTT platforms or YouTube needs to be regulated. And there is a version of a broadcaster's bill which gives the government overarching rights in terms of what they can choose to keep and take down. It's an important story which is being covered for all the wrong reasons, right?
Yeah.
There are legitimate angles, legitimate journalistic angles that you can take to the story. But now it's about #BeerBicepsFilth. And that is unfortunately the level of discourse in this country. And circling back to your point, it is of course because of people like Ranveer also. But I feel like the traditional media needs to be held to higher standards than the internet. And that really annoys me. Sorry, end of rant.
No, don't know.
Even so, interestingly, like again on Barkha's panel, Barkha has taken out, her team had taken out these videos of Ranveer from this podcast a few years ago, a couple of years ago maybe, talking about how to patao girls, etc., etc. Which is also on the Beer Biceps podcast, 10 like guest explaining 10 ways, etc., etc. And then Barkha was asking me, like, you're defending Ranveer and he's saying this. I'm like, Barkha, you're asking me, you know? And of course, she was doing her job as a journalist and an anchor in that point. But my point of view was that if this is out there for you to have so easily found, when the National Creators, Awards decided to give him that award, they could have also just as easily found it. So if the government of our country thinks that this kind of a content is fine, but draws the line at, when we're saying something completely else, then what is really the line? Where is the line?
But I think that the content of his actual podcast is what is appreciated by the ministers, the right wing, everyone who wanted to be featured on their podcast. And he did the opposite of that. I know you are saying that he has platformed all these people who have said ridiculous things, but those ridiculous things are acceptable by a bunch of people, and it takes a certain level of understanding of the socio-economic scenario of the country to actually say that, oh, this is also wrong, this is also wrong. But that's not how.
वो तो wrong है नहीं, most लोग
It's
लेकर
not
है.
wrong.
Yeah.
And I don't know how to connect this, but when this controversy happened, I as a Gen Z, because I've been asked to come here as a Gen Z, I love stalking. So my first instinct was to go on the profiles of people who are friends of these people, okay, who've been involved in the controversy, and I will not be taking names. Also because it doesn't matter. But I saw all of them have shared Nikhil's post. Okay? And then they are like, why aren't we talking about the important things in the country? I'm like, but you talk about which concealer and which lipstick to use all day. And when something happens to your own friend, you just reshare a post by an influencer who's anyway talking about 10 different things. Right? So talk about things, no? Like, what do you want to talk about? You yourself have never talked about anything important happening in the country. You have turned a blind eye towards half the important issues in this country. Suddenly you're like, oh, well, I saw this video of an influencer who has, and it looks very childish, I'm sorry to say, but he's, I shouldn't have said he. I can say
This should be on this cannot be edited out.
It can't,
Yeah.
Garima's inner monologue.
Exactly.
He has listed things that are happening in the country, and it looks like he just Googled, like he chat GPT'd it probably, like,
India news.
important things that are happening in the country right now. Guys, what about these 10 issues in the country? I'm like, how much do you know about these 10 issues? Okay, talk. So it's ridiculous how these people are saying that we need to be talking about XYZ things when the people who are already talking about these things, for example, there are a lot of content creators who talk about politically relevant issues. So as a Gen Z and as someone who watches these people for entertainment, I was like, your outrage right now just seems so out of place. Like, it's so easy to just outrage over this. Like, what do you are not this type. So yeah, that's just what that was my first thought.
It's a very interesting point.
Everything on the internet is a fight for relevance. The reason everybody wanted to be on Beer Biceps is that it makes them more relevant. The reason everybody wanted to be on India's Got Latent is because it made them more relevant. And today they are talking about both of these issues is because it makes them more relevant. And again, I see the irony that we are also having this conversation, but we are going to be doing this every week, and there's going to be different issues every week. It just so happens in the second week in itself, this has blown up.
I think that's the thing, right? Like, we are talking about the other things also. So this is just one of the, and we spoke about all of the uncomfortable aspects of it also.
Yeah.
So I don't see.
But I really thought that new media. I don't know if it's disappointing or if it is in many ways for me an expected outcome of this or expected thing, but new media not really banding together is a missed opportunity. You could all have come together, all comedians could have come together, stood up for Samay publicly, and it may have made a difference. I don't know if it would have, but it may have. The new media is not, even as you said, for me, it's just pretty like upsetting in many ways that not enough people are banding together to outrage against this. You're outraging against this only as if it's like another outrage. It's just like you're doing
Another
this.
thing.
Yeah, it's just like, oh, okay, one more thing has happened, so we are just going to talk about this. No, this is a very big thing.
It's
This-
very nuanced whataboutry.
Yeah,
It's like
but-
whataboutery that's acceptable.
But
Yeah.
I mean, we need, if अगर यहाँ पर तुम नहीं खड़े होगे ना, तो फिर तुम, yeah, they'll come. It's like, it's that thing, right? Like first they came for them, they are going to come for you also.
Yeah.
On the again on the Barkha thing, and it was very fascinating for me. The reason I keep bringing it back is because it was fascinating for me to hear the point of view of all the other people who are obviously not like me, who are not left liberals in whatever, and who very self-proclaimed were like right or center right or whatever it is. The big question was that who defines the line for what is decency. And their thing was that if we feel bad, then we define that line, right? And society defines the line. My counter question was, why is this the thing you feel bad about? Then the several hundred assaults and rape cases of women that happen in this country, and they said this is whataboutery, and I was like, no, this is not. This is about prioritization of state resources. It's a prioritization of media resources. It's a prioritization of our culture, of our society. What are we prioritizing? We only prioritize when there's a massive case that happens and, one doctor, and nothing, and then we'll outrage. There'll be one big rape case that everybody in the country gets angry about. After that, we'll forget, and you still open the newspaper the next morning, there are three other rape cases.
Yeah.
Nobody's opening
And
the
no,
newspaper.
I am opening every day and I'm telling you, it's literally, it is so... Thanks, Garima. Fair
No,
enough.
that's what I wanted to say.
That was the important point that you were going to make.
No, I mean, go on.
Yeah, but say.
That's part of what I think. It's to outrage about other things, you need to have knowledge about other things. How are people supposed to outrage over, say, I don't know, like this, for
Emergency
example, the emergency,
yeah,
how are they supposed to outrage over protests? Say, I mean, you need to know certain
You need to put
laws,
in
you
work.
need to
Yeah.
you need to put in work to outrage over these things. So I just think it's easy outrage, like.
That's a fair
But
point.
also the thing that I'm sick of and that you kind of alluded to, India's Got Latent is a very famous show. Young people clearly like it. But older people, I'm kind of tired of this attitude that older people, not just on Barkhadat's panel, but in general, or the lawmakers of this country also, don't factor that in. It's not like you're giving young people a choice or even thinking, and outside of this comment, in general, dark humor shows, etc. Okay, kids are watching it. It's fine. Like, why does it need to become a moral emergency to say that just because young people are watching it, it's wrong, right?
I just wanted to say a very uncle thing at this point, which is that there is a conversation to be had about what the insane level of abuses and sometimes what passes off as dark humor is actually insensitive and is actually toxic and is actually misogynist or sexist. And there are certain things over here, not only on Samay's show, but I would say in a lot of these spaces, especially YouTube spaces where I give an example, right? And nothing to do with now Samay's show.
Sure.
And I don't want to talk about what he may or may not have intended when he did this. He made a joke about Russians and he said ki there is Russian to 6,000 mein mil jati hai. He made this really insensitive joke. Now you can call it joke, you can call it in context, you can call it whatever it is. The amount of harassment anybody who's been a Russian in India at this point of time has been getting since that joke went viral on social media. Now, of course, there's a conversation to be had. I don't know if he is completely to blame. I don't know if he's not to blame. I don't know who is to be blamed in such circumstances. But there's a joke that is said that sticks to a community. There's a downstream effect of all of this. So we cannot also just raise our hands and say कि हाँ सभी सही है.
No, for sure.
You know, so I'm just pointing this out that
Yeah.
there is, but my problem is, हम लोग the way that we tackle these issues in society is either we brush everything under a carpet for the longest time and say कि अच्छा बात नहीं करेंगे because we are like I don't know what we are scared of to confront things that are actual real issues, and then when we confront something we make it the number one thing on this planet कि इसके अलावा तो कुछ अब बात होगी ही नहीं है.
Yeah.
Which is what has again happened over here. So it's just extreme fucking responses which I just don't understand.
No, but I don't think anybody really knows where the line is, right? But I'll tell you where I've been drawing this line internally in my head while we've been having this conversation. Obviously, in comedy in general, there is these well-established concepts of that you should try to punch up and not punch down. I feel like an extension of that is that as you should not try to name specific people or communities because that can cause real harm, and the example that you're giving also talks about that. My thing is that if it's a hypothetical, and I'll draw another parallel to a very popular type of humor, right? Dead baby jokes, which are not new, been around for like 15-20 years. The idea, and it's polarizing. Some people are disgusted by them, some people find it funny, and that is the premise of dark humor also. But as long as it's a hypothetical thing, I feel like it should be okay, right? I think maybe that is one line, and I think part of the problem is that nobody knows.
I
where
think
to draw that line.
मुझे वही लग again, and I love Gari's because she's the youngest among us, so
Yeah.
far I love her opinion also on this. But for me, what I think is that if people in a room decide together, adults in a room decide together that this is where the line is, you know, and you're doing it in a private space, completely fine. The moment you are somebody who's doing it in public, you have to have some thought applied there. You know, whatever that thought is. Having said that, does that mean that if I'm offended by it, the person that I'm offended by should be put into jail, their passport should be taken away, their livelihood should be taken away? I don't think so. But it's such a nuanced conversation that I would have rather that, you know, the thing that, you know, Ranveer, there would have been outrage against him was when he platformed people who said some really vile things, you know, which were hateful to, you know, certain communities and religions in our country. उस टाइम पे वो किसी ने कुछ कहा नहीं, तो वो मेरा मतलब anyway, I don't know.
But मेरा भी, and I want Garima to weigh in also. But I think like the one thing again that I will say is that in all of the examples that you're mentioning, and even take comedians in the West, take like a Dave Chappelle who is saying transphobic things now, right? Take and all of those things have real world implications where it influences the minds of people against already oppressed, marginalized communities.
Correct.
Right? Whether that is women, whether that is non-binary folks, anybody in marginalized communities. I want to ask this and genuinely, and maybe this should just be something that all of us ask ourselves, and including our politicians and our lawmakers, that if the main point of contention is about Ranveer's hypothetical question, what is the effect of that we are afraid of him asking that question? What do we think is the worst thing that could happen from Ranveer having asked this specific question since this has caused outrage? Do you genuinely think that people are going to talk to their parents about this? Nobody's able to articulate it. Everybody's just like, chi. This is a disgusting thing to say. Garima, sorry, you've been silent for
Yeah,
a long.
because I was saying that when you asked this question, I started thinking about it very seriously. That like how would I have handled this, and what is the correct way? What are these boundaries? And then I thought about ministers are not doing that. Like they just want to make a mountain out of a molehill, which is and for their own personal agendas. Like they are not doing this, and unfortunately. And it's so confusing because all these relevant conversations apparently like what is the boundary and what is okay and what is not okay now happening on podcasts, right? Like it's just you have to tune into a podcast but you have to be very careful about which podcast you're tuning into because this one. But these relevant conversations, these nuanced conversations are happening here. It's not like nobody's actually thinking about this. So I'm like, why should I think about it? Like, why should I? Make me a minister, then I'll think about it. But yeah, like why am I taking the stress of thinking about how I would have handled? I wouldn't have. Nobody is actually thinking about how the question is affecting or what the question is doing to the youth of the country. Because if you really care about the youth of the country, there are more than enough platforms and not even platforms, their own channels where they are talking about things that bother them, and you don't seem to care. So what is this sort of facade that, oh, you know, the youth is going to be affected? Like, oh, like, ask us, no, we'll tell you what is affecting us. Why you? Yeah, it's basically, the country sounds like a, you know, middle-aged man who needs a lot of therapy. And as you said, right, like, then they don't talk about anything, they brush everything under the carpet, and then when they do, it's like Mahabharat, right? Like, it's just the worst thing, and then the family is just split. So it's a middle-aged man who just needs a lot of therapy, and they actually don't care about what the youth is thinking. So, like, if you care, like, come talk, we'll talk, but you don't want to talk, so stop pretending.
That's why we have you on the podcast.
Can I ask a question? Were you able to talk? Did you at all, by any chance, have a conversation about this with your family, your parents?
Yeah, we spoke about it, but not in depth. Like, they were just.
What were their POVs?
I mean, they were like, we've seen the video. I think I can't, in all seriousness, I really can't defend Ranveer, because I don't support the content that he's put out time and again. But at least with Apoorva, they were also agreeing that we've seen the whole video, and she was responding to a very disgusting comment made by a contestant, right? So they were on the same page about this. So that was, thankfully, yeah.
वो तुमने बात ही नहीं की. Like, the fact that there was something far more outrageous that was said in that episode by some random contestant to Apoorva, where he, said something so demeaning and so, again, so sexist, so misogynist, so vile, so ugly. And that is not what anybody chooses to get angry about, that why are boys and men. And I feel pity for that guy, right? Like, it's not even that I want him to now go to jail. Just the fact that there is a young man who thinks that that is an acceptable thing to say to a woman. And then, of course, the defenders of that man who say, अरे but ये भी तो गाली गलौज करती है. But वो तुम पे तो ना कर रही है. She's not coming to your home and saying something to you personally, or on a public platform first going up and saying कि तुम ऐसे हो, तुम वैसे हो, etc, etc. She's talking about her own experiences with men in her life, and she has the full right to do that. But if there's some man who decides to take that personally and makes a personal attack on a woman, saying something so vile and malicious, and she responds to that, and she's the person who's now going, is being hounded.
I want to add one thought to that, which is even the fallout of it. Samay is in the US doing his tour. He's not had to appear anywhere in person, and he's been summoned many times by many different people, and he's sorting it out. Ranveer has talked a little bit about the backlash that he has faced and people invading his mother's clinic, etc., which is not okay. If you see that one video, Apoorva is one of the only people who was on the panel who has actually gone to court herself to record the statement, or gone to the police station to record her statement, and she's getting mobbed by reporters. She's having to have somebody protect her physically from the media that just wants a shot at her. And
we need to have a full episode about media and our Indian media and what Indian media prioritizes. And I think for me, I would like to actually conclude this conversation by saying it's very important that we start choosing what to amplify and choosing what is the conversation and discourse that we want out there. And when we are, when we see something intelligent, when we see something thoughtful, something nuanced, share that. Instead of spending so much of the time talking about what is crap, spend the time talking about what you like, what you appreciate, and what is making you smarter. We don't do enough of that.
I agree with you. I just feel that it's also this ecosystem where what is going to get more likes, comments, which we are all a victim of. I just think that it's our responsibility, and we should be careful, but again, it's how do we fight the system which encourages this kind of content which is easy to consume?
I think both things are important, and I think that the reason and the justification that I've also found for why we are talking about it and spending time, and somebody asked me last week, what is the mission statement of your podcast? And I think I've come to that now, which is often that people take sides without understanding why they're taking a particular side. And it is important to have these nuanced conversations and hold space for each other. Even on this, we have disagreed about a lot of things, but it's important to analyze why. And I think that in itself lends itself to us wanting more informed discourse. If we are introspecting as opposed to just reacting. And at the same time, we should give enough amplification to other things that are going on, which might be positive, which we might care about more, which we're going to do in this next segment, which is called, before we end, what's your bud? What is something that gives you hope?
What am I hopeful about? It is actually, like every time that there is noise in the world and when there's so much outrage, the thing that I always gravitate towards is family. Like, and ironically in this situation, it is something that always grounds me. My mom is in town, just spending time with her, spending time with my wife. Those are the things that always kind of make me realize that there is a real world which is not this crazy, not this angry, not this full of... It's not senseless, which I think is what I sometimes see when I see the world around us. I just see nothing making sense. And then the moment I am with my family, when I'm with the people that I love, I find everything makes sense. So for me, Bud is always kind of going back to the people that I love, because that gives me hope and helps me come back and want to talk about this.
That's a sweet answer, and I think it's a good one, and we've circled back to family, like you said, which is important. And I'm glad that you have that.
Can I add one more thing?
Yes, to your bud.
Yeah, to my bud.
Sorry, yeah, go on.
I was, in fact, going to say that, did you guys see that the one guy who sent rape threats to Apoorva, he got called out on Reddit and they found his profile and he got called out so badly that he had to kind of deactivate his account. So I am like, one good thing that is happening out of this is like, call all these idiots, losers out. So I was very...
That's a good, that's a, and my bud is something similar since both of you asked me. Thanks.
What's your bud, Kevin?
Oh, thank you. I'm allowed to have a bud as the host of this podcast. Within the terrible things that have happened at KIIT in Odisha, with the student from Nepal who's died by suicide and apparently due to harassment, the one thing that has made me hopeful is that the young people of that college are really standing up to the administration. They are making noise about it. The first that I heard about this was on Twitter, where student unions have constantly been tweeting, even before it became a diplomatic crisis, wherein the officials of that college have apparently told Nepali students that our college budget is more than your country's GDP, in response to somebody from that country who has died in this college. I am hopeful about the fact that the Indian students have also not let this go. And it could have been easy to look the other way. I think we do that very often. We've talked about how creators are also not supporting their own industry. But that makes me hopeful that they are not letting this go, and now it is something that is getting national media attention. Obviously also because the Nepali Prime Minister has tweeted about it, but in general. And ties back to what you said, that young people, I still feel like there's a lot to be hopeful about. And I hope we keep fighting the good fight. And yeah, shout out to all of those people who are not letting this go. Garima, thank you for coming here, despite not being a Yuvaa employee, and in exchange for financial remuneration.
How will you edit this out? How will you edit this out?
This part we'll probably keep. Which you deserve. And thank you for sharing your opinion. And thank you, Nikhil, despite being sick, because of this podcast.
On cue.
For coming back to it. I hope to see both of you next week, and I hope to be talking about something that's more important to the national state of things than jokes and creators, but you never know.
Are you saying there are more important things than beer biceps in our country?
There are more important things.
Wow.
I want to talk about that.
That's a big statement.
I can only talk about like popcorn stuff.
Thanks.
I am going to file an FIR against you for saying that.
Okay.
How dare you?
You'll add in that I made you sick also. So
Yeah, I'm going to just wait and
supporting
see.
it.
Fine, he'll just be on bed rest. He won't even have time to file an FIR. He's
I have
too
to keep
sick.
taking Allegras and thinking that antibiotic.
File an FIR on Allegra. So not an
Not
antibiotic.
Allegra. Allegra can sponsor us still. There is hope.
Yes, we love you, Allegra.
We love you.
Although that would be weird. What's the show called? So what?
What's your call?
So called.
Great.
So
We hope you enjoyed that episode. If you did, please follow So What by Yuvaa on Instagram. We have additional content that goes out every day, or at least almost every day on that platform. We also have a Substack for So What if you prefer to read as opposed to listening to the podcast. And if you don't want to see our faces and only want to listen to it, it is also available on all audio platforms. And as always, if you like Yuvaa's content, like, share, and subscribe to We Are Yuvaa on all social media platforms.